Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into one of the most intense and heartbreaking stories in the entire Bible. It's a raw, unfiltered look at a royal family in crisis, a story about obsession, betrayal, and the devastating consequences that follow when justice is denied. This is the story of Tamar, Amnon, and Absalom, the children of King David. So grab a drink, get comfortable, because this one is a heavy hitter. It all starts with Amnon, King David's eldest son. He's a prince, with all the privilege that comes with it. But instead of focusing on his duties, he develops a dangerous obsession with his half-sister, Tamar. The text says he was so distressed that he became sick over her. Now, let's be clear, this wasn't love. Love doesn't make you sick with desire to the point of plotting harm. This was a twisted infatuation, a possessive obsession that completely distorted his view of her. He didn't see her as a sister, a person with her own life and feelings. He saw her as an object, something he had to have. Every family has that one relative who gives terrible advice, right? Well, in this story, that person is Jonadab, Amnon's cousin. The Bible calls him a very shrewd man. Jonadab sees his cousin as miserable and, instead of helping him see sense, he concocts a deceitful plan. He tells Amnon to pretend to be sick and asks King David to send Tamar to his room to cook for him. It's a manipulative trap, using the pretense of illness and a request for care to isolate Tamar and make her vulnerable. David, unaware of the sinister plot, agrees. He loves his son, and he trusts that this is a simple request. So, he sends Tamar to Amnon's quarters, unknowingly walking her into a nightmare. Tamar arrives, a caring sister ready to help her sick brother. She prepares food for him right there in his room. But when she brings it to him, the trap is sprung. Amnon grabs her and demands she lie with him. Tamar is terrified, but she doesn't just freeze, she pleads with him. She appeals to his reason, to his sense of honor, to the law. She says, "No, my brother, do not violate me, for such a thing is not done in Israel. Do not do this disgraceful thing." She even tries to offer a way out, suggesting he could ask their father, the king, for her hand in marriage, which, while complicated, was a desperate attempt to avoid the immediate horror. She's begging him to see her as a human being, to consider the consequences for her, for him, for their family. But Amnon isn't listening. His obsession has completely deafened him to her pleas. He overpowers her and does the unthinkable. He violates his own sister. The act itself is brutal and tragic, but what happens next is just as revealing about his character. The moment the act is over, the Bible says his intense obsession flips into an equally intense hatred. It says, "Then Amnon hated her with a very great hatred, so that the hatred with which he hated her was greater than the love with which he had loved her." Again, not love. It was a selfish lust that, once satisfied, left him with nothing but disgust and contempt for the person he just destroyed. He tells her to get up, go, and has his servant throw her out of his room, locking the door behind her. Tamar is left devastated. She tears her ornate robe, a symbol of her royal status and virginity, and puts ashes on her head. She walks away, crying out in anguish. Her life has been shattered. The shame and trauma she carries are unimaginable. She goes to her full brother Absalom and tells him what happened. Absalom is filled with rage, but he tells Tamar to be quiet for now, knowing that an immediate confrontation might only make things worse. He brings her into his own home, where she lives out the rest of her days in desolate isolation. Tamar's story is a heartbreaking picture of the vulnerability of women in that time. A life of sorrow and trauma forced upon her by her own brother's brutal selfishness. So, what does the king do? How does the most powerful man in the nation, the father of both the victim and the perpetrator, respond? The Bible says when King David heard what happened, he was very angry. And that's it, he was angry. But he did nothing, no punishment for Amnon, no justice for Tamar. Why? The text implies it's because Amnon was his firstborn, his heir. David's love for his son, perhaps a blinding favoritism, completely paralyzed him. He failed to act. He chose to ignore the crime, to sweep this monstrous injustice under the rug, hoping it would just go away. This inaction is the critical turning point that sends the entire family spiraling into chaos. David's failure to deliver justice created a vacuum, and that vacuum was filled by Absalom's rage. For 2 whole years, Absalom holds on to his anger. He doesn't speak a word, good or bad, to Amnon. But underneath that silence, a plan for revenge is brewing. David's silence, his refusal to hold Amnon accountable, was not a neutral act. It was a message to Absalom that if he wanted justice for his sister, he would have to take it himself. It was a colossal failure of leadership and fatherhood. David's inaction essentially gave Absalom permission to seek his own form of justice, and this decision would have catastrophic consequences for everyone. 2 years later, Absalom makes his move. He hosts a sheep-shearing festival, a big party, and invites all the king's sons, including Amnon. David is hesitant to let Amnon go, but Absalom persuades him. At the feast, when Amnon is drunk and merry, Absalom gives the signal to his servants. They strike Amnon down and kill him, avenging the violation of their sister, Tamar. The other princes flee in terror, and news reaches David that Absalom has killed all of his sons. While this turns out to be an exaggeration, the truth is horrifying enough. One son is dead, and another is a murderer on the run. Absalom flees into exile for 3 years. The cycle of sin is now in full swing. One horrific act of violence, born from unchecked obsession, has led to a calculated act of revenge. David's family is broken. He's lost 2 sons in a single day, one to death, one to exile, and his daughter Tamar remains a desolate, forgotten victim in the background. David's failure to act as a just king and a protective father allowed the poison of injustice to fester, and it erupted into a cycle of violence that he couldn't control. His inaction didn't keep the peace. It guaranteed a war within his own household. This story is so powerful because it feels so tragically real. It's a case study in how personal sin doesn't just affect the individual. Amnon's unchecked desire didn't just hurt him, it destroyed Tamar's life. It turned Absalom into a killer, and it fractured King David's family and kingdom. It shows us the deep, interconnected web of consequences that follow betrayal and dishonor. David's inaction highlights a systemic failure. When those in power refuse to protect the vulnerable and punish the wicked, it doesn't make the problem disappear. It empowers more violence and erodes the very fabric of family and society. Tamar's story is a crucial reminder of the need for justice. Her voice was ignored by her brother, and her pain was ignored by her father. She became a silent, tragic figure, a living symbol of a system that failed to protect her. Her experience underscores the lasting trauma that such an event inflicts. It wasn't just a single moment of violence. It was a lifelong sentence of sorrow and isolation. In the end, this dark chapter in David's family serves as a profound warning. It's about the destructive power of unchecked desires and the moral bankruptcy of inaction. It's about a sister betrayed, a brother consumed by revenge, and a father whose passivity led to ruin. It's a raw and difficult story, but it's one that forces us to confront the importance of accountability, the need to protect the innocent, and the devastating spiraling cost of injustice. Thanks for watching, and if you found this breakdown meaningful, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more deep dives into these powerful stories. See you next time, and God bless.